Thanks for joining us. So I was just setting this up about this New York Times story. The Russian ruble keeps rising, hitting a 7-year high. So
Yeah.
that's not what I expected to read. I thought it was going to be a 7 or a 20-year low. So is this true? Is it possible? And how does this work?
Greg, I hope that one day you would learn Russian and you would listen to TV channel February's morning, and then you would know from the very first day that that's what was expected to happen. Because
Okay, well that's so you anticipated this. You went up.
yes,
Okay, great.
our guests, which are very good and strong economists. I was
Wait,
thinking
I
I as a dilettante, I was thinking the same way as you did. So
so here, I thank you for not totally throwing me out to dry and make me feel stupid. So, all right, I just put a link to February morning in the chat. What you do when you get there is it's Telegram, and then you can translate everything there, and it is an incredible source of information about what's going on. So, thank you for plugging it early and often while we're talking.
yeah, thank you. So the story behind the ruble is very simple. What happened after the beginning of war? Firstly, obviously, it plunged and it jumped very, very high. So the exchange rate went as something like 150 rubles for a dollar or something like that. So from when it started, it was 70. Yeah, so it's like it's devalued twice. And even for 150, it was impossible to find it. You should usually pay premium if you wanted to have cash. Then you could have exchanged it like for 200 or something like
Hmm.
that. But what happened next is all foreign companies, they started to withdraw from Russia, and by doing this, imports to Russia dramatically decreased,
Hmm.
and exports, also because of the war, actually increased because the fuel prices went up, and oil and natural gas, and obviously the oil products. So the main things that Russia exports, they went up, and imports virtually ceased.
I want
No,
to clarify. I want to clarify one thing you're saying, just to make sure I understand and everyone else does. When you say exports, you're talking about the revenue from exports, not the actual quantity of exports, correct? So the
yeah,
amount of
physical,
money that came in was
yeah,
increased.
yes, physical exports, they start to decline, but not so significant. They will decline in the future because right now there is this oil embargo coming in, and the general many traders, they reject to refuse to work with Russia. But monetary wise, in terms of the actual dollars, um, Russia receives way more than it was receiving previously. So
Yeah.
it went significantly up. And imports, it didn't zero it completely, but it was many more times than actually exports went up, the imports went down. And as a
Yeah.
result, right now, Russia has the second largest positive trade balance in the world, just behind China.
Hmm.
And never Russia had anything like this. Plus, additionally, sanctions, so that all those rich people, they couldn't get money out of the country. Restrictions on the business accounts, on everything. So as the
Yeah.
result, right now Russia is totally flooded with hard currency. It's flooded with dollars and euro and all other types of currencies, and they have nowhere to go to. And it's even commercial banks, they now imposed a negative interest on the currency accounts. So they are basically telling their clients, withdraw money. Because we don't want them. We don't want this liquidity. It's a problem for us. We have nowhere to put it. and it's being developed, and developed. And it's already Putin is speaking that it's awful. It has to be fixed because it's killing the industry. It makes all non-oil and gas exports uncompetitive. And it significantly deprives the Fed.
What? Okay. Let's see if Ilya comes back. There he is.
Finance, I believe, of Russia. They calculated that every single ruble, every single position in the exchange rate, so every dollar that ruble gets more expensive wipes out 140 billion rubles from the federal budget. So $10 that means 1.4 trillion rubles that were eliminated from the federal budget. So they already lost like a quarter of it just because of this more powerful ruble. And now everybody in Russia is thinking, all in the Russian government, they are thinking how to devalue ruble at least a little bit, but they can do nothing because nobody wants to buy dollars because there's so many of them in the country, and with no imports, how you would spend them.
So I guess I have a question about, you've talked about Putin and the financial industry and government officials understanding not just the fact that it's a 7-year high, but what that really means for the economy. Does the average or typical Russian understand that, or do they actually see this as something positive for their economy?
Yeah, obviously, overwhelming majority of Russians think that it's a good thing because they used to see it in the past when problems. That means the rubles go down. Good things are happening. Ruble goes up, so they're used to this. They don't understand that right now. Actually, Russian industry is being killed because of this process.
And do you think a conclusion of Russians who believe this is a good thing for the economy, another conclusion is, oh, well, maybe a war is a good thing? Maybe this, maybe this invasion of Ukraine is actually a positive for my country.
Usually they don't link it like this. It's
Mhm.
not what we see, but we definitely see the trend. Oh, it's not so bad as we thought, because originally everybody was really scared about the problems, and now because of the exchange rate, that the ruble is so strong, they say, okay, it's not that bad. At least the situation is under control. It's not in the free fall. Obviously the government knows what they're doing. And everything that I'm talking about right now, obviously, is not what you would hear on Russian TV. You would hear upbeat voices that you see, we managed. They wanted to crush us, but they failed. You see, Joe Biden was saying that the ruble $2 is 200. And now it's 50. So you see, they fail, those imperialists.
Yeah, well, and that's where I was going. There's, I'm sure, a lot of propaganda to paint this as a very positive picture, when in reality, it's not, when you understand it. I want to talk about another story. This was from the Financial Times. I'm going to put a link to it in the chat box. The headline is, hold on a sec here. The headline is, Olaf Scholz says partnership with Putin's Russia is inconceivable. German chancellor pledges new Marshall Plan for Ukraine after trip to Kyiv and advisors' controversial comments. So, first of all, what is your take on this story? And then I'm just wondering, what do you think Putin and the Kremlin, how are they responding to this?
I think that everything that Scholz is saying is very much driven with his internal political problems within Germany. And right now, the majority of Germans, they are asking for more tough position on Russia, and to be more proactive on Ukraine. And just to illustrate, I just witnessed it. My son this week, he initiated on change.org a campaign to collect signatures to petition Scholz to deliver heavy weapons to Ukraine. And the target audience was Russians that live in Germany, Ukrainians that live in Germany, and Germans who live in Germany and who help Ukrainians. It went up extremely fast. In just 2 days, it collected 25,000 signatures. So it was like a rocket takeoff. And we delivered it to Scholz when he was in Kiev. Our Ministry of Foreign Affairs delivered it to Scholz. And obviously that very much reflects the public opinion in Germany. And there are tensions within the coalition that they have. Scholz is the most moderate out of them, and all others are pressuring him to stay on a more tough position, and he has to react to this. The interesting thing is what we hear from our just sources in Germany. It's not an official position of Ukrainian authorities, obviously, and that's not been so widely publicized. But we think that it's not Scholz just doesn't want to deliver the weapons to Ukraine. It looks like he doesn't have them. They were not spending enough money on their military for such a long period of time. So it looks like they just don't have things that they can send to Ukraine. They are too weak. And they actually they started producing very actively, and they are increasing their military spending very significantly in Germany. But here, not being a big fan of Mr. Trump, but remember how many times he called Germans to increase their military spending and to conform to NATO standards, and they were almost twice under the target, below the target on the spending that they had. They all so much relied that they would stay forever under American military umbrella. So they really didn't spend enough money, and what we see right now is just the inability to deliver.
You just opened such a big can of worms. Right? I mean, because on one hand, they've promised something you're suggesting they don't have. They don't want the world to know that they don't have them because, as you said, then they look weak. Nobody wants to be in that position, especially at a time like now when the world order is being reordered. And then there's a lot of other, there's the relationship with the United States, the previous president. Somebody's going to write a dissertation or a best-selling book about what you just described. But what is the impact of that on? I mean, does the Kremlin know all this, or did they just hear it from you?
No, I think everybody, in the military intelligence should be aware. It's just, you see that there are certain things, especially about Germany, which are kind of not being said in public because they are politically incorrect. Maybe it's because of the legacy of World War II or something like this. For example, I was arguing all the time that Nord Stream 2 is more Germans' interest and Germans' instrument to control Europe, because construction of Nord Stream 2 allows them to be the central dispatch point for all of the energy flows within Europe. And actually, my idea that, Chancellor Schröder is not a traitor who betrayed Germany for money working for Mr. Putin, but he really is a mediator because he understands the fundamental German interest and he is working for that interest. And Putin understands Germans' interest and he wants to help Germans to reinforce themselves within Europe. And in exchange, he is getting what he wants over in terms of his influence over Eastern Europe. And I think that's kind of the plan here. The balance of power within Europe after Brexit, it changed so significantly. At the end of the day, the whole building of European Union was created based on the triangle of power between Germany, France, and Great Britain. And that was kind of a guarantee. It's a post-war configuration that was a guarantee that nobody has the upper hand, and
Yes.
that Europe is neither a greater Germany nor a greater France, nor an Anglo-Saxon project, right? After Brexit, and France is obviously is not in the as powerful position as it was before because of the internal economics. This balance of powers has significantly been changed inside Europe, and all the debates about the expansion of the European Union is irrevocably linked precisely to this, because if Ukraine is the part of the European Union, that means that the Eastern European bloc would be at least as powerful as Germans. And the Eastern European bloc traditionally is closer to United States and again to England than to Western Europe.
Yes.
And I'm speaking right now about Poland, about Ukraine, about Baltic states. And that means a very significant change in the balance of power again within the European Union. So I think that what politicians are thinking about is about this thing. And nobody, say in the United States, when I was like starting to talk about this in public, it's like I'm saying something impolite, you know, they like it's like it smells bad, you know. No, please don't talk about this. But I was like, okay, so but that's we were talking about the security in Europe that
Yes.
was created by you guys, by Soviet Union, by British after World War II, and at the end of the day, that was a guarantee of the peace in the continent. That it's not about spheres of influence like Putin understands this configuration, but it's about checks and balances between different countries, and it's good when those checks and balances exist. It's bad when those spheres of influence, because it's a oligopoly, right? It's
Yes.
one has a monopoly on one territory, another is monopoly on another territory, and that's not the way I see things should be. But when there are those cross boundaries, checks and balances, it's a good thing. Then it means it's a safe and secure place.
So I want to go back to something you said about Nord Stream 2 and how Germany, I don't know if you're suggesting this is true, or maybe it's even been proven to be true, that it gave them greater influence over the region. Is there anything sinister in that? Or was it known and everybody understood that?
You know, it's a very convenient narrative to present it just as Putin's weapon
Yes.
and as Putin's like secret tool. I'll say Poles, they definitely understood this. You know, all my like off the record talks with them indicated that they clearly understand this. But again, it's a question what you should and what you should not say in public. You know, I am
Yeah.
being the outsider for the European politics, so I can say impolite things. You know, Ukrainian ambassador Mr. Melnik in Berlin is way larger meanie than I am, and he is so undiplomatic. So often, you know, coming from a diplomatic family myself, you know, I sometimes hear what he say and say like, no, I wouldn't dare to say this, but you know, in terms of what we just talked about, I think it's impossible. It's important to bring it to the spotlight, because it indicates the real motives. And I think that in Germany there is a very powerful lobby, and it's not just economic lobby, it's a political lobby
Yeah.
that understands how useful this project is for the Germany long term.
So I've heard you say more than once here when talking to us that you're an oil and gas guy. I mean, you were with
Mhm.
Schlumberger, Yukos, and almost everything we've talked about here today, although I didn't realize it when I was getting ready for the show, almost everything we've talked about has come back to oil and gas. And so when you look at the current situation, all of it, the things we've talked about, even things we haven't talked about, what's next for Russia in terms of, oil and gas is their greatest asset, right? What's
Mhm.
going to happen next with them, their ability to export it, the impact on their economy, and is that going to give them strength or weaken them in the fight with Ukraine?
Obviously, there would be significant problems for Russia, and here I'm speaking not for Putin. I hope for him as well, but these are problems for Russia. And when it would be our government, we will have to deal with it
Yeah.
because what Putin is achieving right now is forcing Europeans, especially Western Europeans, to fast forward their programs in green energy and to substitute imports from Russia. And previously they were kind of moving slow, and especially with green energy, because it's an obvious toll on the ordinary people. Obviously, no politicians were ready to enforce it. But right now is a good humanitarian cause. It's all
Mhm.
about Ukraine, so let's do it. And that's, by the way, it's an explanation. I had also this debate with one of very well-known economists who, just with numbers, he was indicating very clearly that this whole embargo thing is a mistake. He's saying that if Europe would not stop import Russian oil and gas, but instead put a special tax on it, that would basically slash the price of this oil and gas that would be coming to Russia by half.
Hmm.
The result would be way better, because in this situation you will have the same physical quantities coming to the market, so the price for it would not go up, so ordinary Europeans would not suffer, but the outcome for Putin would be worse, because right now a lot of the decrease in the physical exports has been compensated with a higher prices. So
Yes.
his revenues they are affected already, but not to that degree as his physical export decline. So everything that he said was extremely rational, with one exception, that everything that politicians are doing has to be linked with political processes. And right now, the important political process that is of interest to many is this green transition. So they're using this as an excuse, saying, okay, you have to pay this double prices at the gas stations, and you have to pay a higher price for electricity and for the heat and for the transportation and for everything. But as the result, we will have the green transition. You will have the same oil, but for the cheaper price. You actually do the opposite thing. You are not making the green transition. You are conserving the situation. You hurt Russia, but you're conserving the situation in terms of the traditional hydrocarbons. And so they're using this Putin's attack as an excuse. And that's why when Putin is blaming the West, especially at the recent St. Petersburg Economic Forum, saying that you are calling this inflation like Putin's inflation, but it's hypocrisy because you have created it yourself. He's right, as
Mhm.
just the origin of things is his invasion. If he wouldn't make the invasion, people would not start this transition the way it's happening right now. But at the end of the day, he should be thankful for it himself. Yes.
I actually read that argument about the oil and gas, and I had a similar reaction that you did, and I want to make sure my thinking on it was in line with what you just said. My thought to that was, if we did, and who was it? Who was it that was making this? I read it in probably in the New York Times or the Washington Post. Who was it that was presenting this point of view? Do you remember who it
With
was?
me, with me, yes, I remember it quite well. It's one of our best economists, Vladislav Inozemtsev.
Mhm. Okay, so then I may have
He's not. He's not in the in the mainstream because again, it's very unfortunate that in Russia it's either you are with Putin or if you are opposed to Putin, but then you have to be a kosher neoliberal, Washington consensus,
yes,
Chicago school, no
yes.
deviation from it. You just have to be like straight as an arrow.
Yes.
And Vladislav,
All right. Well, let's see if Ilya comes back. Ilya, I don't know if you're okay. Can't hear you. We can't hear you. I think we lost him. I'm going to try to get him back for the last couple of minutes. Agnieszka, the last thing I was going to do was ask him your question. Let's see if we can get him back. If we can't, we'll pick it up with him next week. Hold on here. Let's see what happens if we can get Ilya back. Hang on here. I will share with you what I was about to say. If you go and do a search of news from the last few days, you'll see others making the same. Okay, Agnieszka, we'll hold your question for next week since you're going to leave anyway.
yep.
There he is. We lost you there for a minute. The point I wanted to make is that when I read a similar argument in the news in the last few days, my thought, and I think it's in line with what you're saying, my thought was the problem with the argument is it's not doing anything to change your dependence in the future on Russia's oil. And I think that's part of what you were just saying, but I wanted to
Yep.
reinforce that. When you change behavior, you're also changing your relationship. And that's a future pain for Russia, which is part of what the goal is right now, is to inflict pain and in the future to change Russia's behavior.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. That's why I'm saying that the motivation there is not purely in economy. It's not
Yes.
in politics, and there are many different things that are linked together. But that was exactly your original question of what would happen to Russia after all this madness would go away, and really, we are losing right now a lot of our traditional and most reliable and most profitable markets, which is Europe, and
Yes.
it's obviously it is a shame.
Yes.
And what I'm afraid is that even with the resources of the future, say with hydrogen, and Russia can produce a lot of hydrogen and can export the same hydrogen with the same bloody pipelines to the same bloody Europe. But I'm afraid that Nord Stream 2 would not be used even for hydrogen
Mhm.
in the future. Maybe, but I'm afraid that it will not.
Unless the personality of Russia changes so dramatically that it becomes an acceptable world partner.
Well, you're right, but who would guarantee to people that whatever change would happen is the change for good, right? So
Yeah.
people would still have these thoughts on the backs of their mind that no, we better not. What would happen, and so it would take decades and decades to rebuild the trust. It's very easy to destroy the trust, and it's again, it's a stupidity of the current Russian authorities in the Soviet Union, in the very height of the Cold War. Brezhnev and his heirs, they were very strictly enforcing that natural gas should not be used as a political weapon. They never used it for this purpose. They were as reliable can be, and they built this trust for many, many years. And Putin destroyed it completely.
Yeah. Hmm. All right. Well, you probably saw in the chat, Agnieszka had a question I was going to ask you. She had to leave because we're now a few minutes overtime. We'll get to that next week. Is there anything you want to add today before I let you go?
Just let everyone join us next week. I think that's the best thing that we should do.
I like that
by,
idea a
by,
lot.
by the way, no, there's one thing I wanted to make quite. Thank you for making me remember this, because this week actually was very rich with events in Russia on the grassroots resistance. That, as I was saying several times, it's gaining its momentum. It's brewing up in Russia, and this week there was two very symbolic violent attacks. Firstly, there was an arson event when a group of people in Yaroslavl, it's like 300 kilometers away from Moscow, put on fire the house. It's a house museum of the first female cosmonaut, Valentina Tereshkova. And the reason why they did it was she is member of Russian parliament, the State Duma, and she was the person who initiated changes in the constitution that allowed Putin to stay in power a year ago. She was the formal initiator. Obviously, it was a formality, but she was entrusted and she presented the changes in the constitution. So the message that was left there is that we really admire Valentina for her bravery in space, but we totally hate her that she is making Putin with us forever. And that's why we think that the best thing to do is not to hurt her personally, but to make any memory of her go away. And that's why they were burning museum, putting on fire museum of hers. And that's the first thing, which is I think is pretty symbolic.
Is it known if that was done by Russians or Ukrainians?
No, it's by Russians. It's all by Russians. So yeah. It's like, Ukrainians are fighting with military objects, But, and the second thing, which actually people in Ukraine, they do believe that it's done by Ukrainians, but I know who has done it, and that's why I know that it's not done by Ukrainians. It's an attack on the refinery in Rostov region, which is not very far from Ukrainian border. But what is interesting about this refinery that it's been owned by Viktor Medvedchuk, Putin's relative, who was in charge of actually influencing the Ukrainian politics. And this refinery he used to finance all these fifth column undercover operations in Ukraine. That was his main source of revenue. And there were Russian activists who actually organized a suicide drone, kamikaze drone attack on this refinery. And this is the first of this kind. So right now, that's probably the largest in terms of impact, that attack that was made by Russian resistance. So when it happened, actually it happened yesterday, yes.
Yes.
Day before yesterday, just yesterday, yes.
And you can tell us without a doubt that it was done by Russians, not Ukrainian.
Yeah, I'm trying to facilitate an interview with those guys. Obviously, they would not speak on camera, but
Yes.
answering questions in writing that we can publish on our media resources. They're a bit reluctant, but I hope that we'll manage to do it.
I want to add to your story because I read about this yesterday. If I understand correctly, not only is the suicide drone and the attack and the target significant, but the fact that these Russians were able to do this with a drone that just cost a few $1,000s, not the cost of military grade, super expensive equipment, kind of opens the door, I would guess, to others in Russia, perhaps Ukrainians, to do similar things using consumer priced objects.
Absolutely, absolutely. In that particular case, the drone was basically self-made. But it's not. It was a very cheap one,
Yes.
so it was not. It was not an expensive piece. Yeah.
Well, let's be honest. You don't need to use it more than once.
No, absolutely. That's exactly my point. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it was like this. Yeah. It's like 1 meter wingspan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you go on Twitter, you can see footage of it flying in and the end result. It is quite
Yeah.
dramatic.
So it was not quadrocopter. It was like a small plane. Yes.
Yes. Yes. All right, Ilya, I am going to put in the chat the URL for the Bravery Foundation, and I'm going to chat a little bit about that because
Yeah, I will very appreciate everybody
Yes.
keeping your.
Are we going to lose him again? Ilya, you froze up, but I'm going to keep talking. So the Bravery Foundation is something that Ilya and his team have created. What they're doing is, he's back. Okay. What they're doing is identifying Russians who, by virtue of their jobs in the government, the military, or part of the propaganda machine, are, in a sense, trapped in a job where they're forced to support the war effort, but they personally don't support the war effort. And so what the Bravery Foundation is doing is extracting them when possible, or enabling them to quit their jobs, so to remove themselves from the machinery of the war, which, as we all know, when someone leaves a job, it creates all kinds of problems. And the Bravery Foundation enables them to quit those jobs and then helps them with things like living expenses and legal fees and things. So it's very important work. Lucas, thank you for putting the link in here as well.
Yeah, primarily primarily not living expenses. Primarily is about defense. When they are being prosecuted, or when they needed to go underground for a certain period of time, when they need to be hidden, that kind of things. When they are in danger. Yeah.
Yeah.